Welcome to the Game Maker's Notebook, a podcast featuring a series of in-depth one-on-one conversations between game makers providing a thoughtful, intimate perspective on the business and craft of interactive entertainment. The Game Maker's Notebook is presented by the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, a member-driven organization dedicated to the recognition and advancement of interactive entertainment.
Hello, and welcome to the Game Maker's Notebook podcast. I'm your host, Robin Hunicke. I'm delighted to be here today with Chelsea Blasko, co-CEO of Iron Galaxy Studios, a friend and someone who's just a real badass in games. I'm really excited to have her on the show. She's been in the industry for about 16 years now and still going strong. So today we're going to have a conversation about her entry into the industry, her experiences, and then cycling through some topics around the pandemic and thinking about how we survive and thrive during times when we can't necessarily all be together. So with that said, I'd just like to say welcome, Chelsea. Welcome to the show. It's so great to have you.
Hi, Robin. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have this chat and
like
just talk to another person.
It's like, I'm just like, oh, it's almost like the old days, except for that I think I need a drink. I don't know about you, but I could definitely use a cocktail.
Yeah. Oh, I should ring my bell and have one brought up.
So tell us a little bit about how you got started in the games industry. Did you go to a games program, decide to become a game developer, and then write a letter to Iron Galaxy saying, "Please hire me"? How did it happen for you?
That's exactly what happened. How did you know? Actually, I had no idea growing up, or no idea really until it happened, that I would be a game developer. As a kid, I didn't even really think about how games were made. I think I thought maybe they made games in Japan. I didn't imagine I could ever make games, right?
Yeah.
So I went to school for German and fine art. That's what I studied in college. Yes. Basically, growing up, I didn't really have a lot of role models for what you could do in life or people to give me a lot of guidance. In my hometown, mostly people either worked at the university or they worked in factories or had just kind of very traditional or service industry jobs. So
Yeah.
I didn't really understand what was even out there. I was always super nerdy. I did things like sign myself up for basic programming summer school, and played a lot of Oregon Trail and remember like programming Run and but yeah, I had no idea about the industry. So after school, I actually taught German and girls PE.
Wow.
And I did that for about 2 years. And I really, even though I enjoyed it, and I think it was a great experience and something, in some ways, I think everyone should do at some point in their career, um, I just was not making much money at all.
Yeah,
It
tell any
was
teacher that and they'll be surprised, right?
Yeah, it was a private school too. So I just thought, okay, I need to figure something else out. And it was just not a great time. I ended up working at the university that I'd gone to, running coffee shops. I worked at an art supply store. I did a bunch of things until I ended up moving up to Chicago to run a fancy ladies' boutique out in the suburbs.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that was the first time I really learned about business, though. And I did buying and I oversaw construction and I managed people and I helped with payroll and I helped, close the end of month and inventory. And it also helped me get over being extremely shy. The combination of kind of performing as a teacher and then
Yeah.
having to talk to vendors and make a lot of phone calls, that really helped me get over I don't know, I was quite shy. I didn't even like to call and order pizza for myself. So I was pretty shy.
Just like anxious, like, okay, they're going to ask me a question and I won't have the answer, like that kind of thing.
Or I just didn't want to talk to people. I don't even know if I was anxious because I knew what toppings I wanted. It just was intimidating to me to get on the phone and talk to people.
Yeah.
And so having that job, I was there for about 4 years. Then I did some more retail management after that. And it was actually a woman I had worked with in retail management that told me about this place in Chicago that was new called EA, and that they were hiring people to come and be producers. And I didn't even really know what that meant. She also said, it seems like they want to hire a lot of women for these roles. So I think you should get over there and give it a shot. And so I did. I feel like sometimes when you really have nothing to lose, and I felt that way, I was employed, I was doing fine where I was, but I didn't feel like I had anything to lose. And it was a good time to take this opportunity and try something new. I was excited about it. I felt like, oh, wow, this is going to be something creative. I like games. At that point, I thought, oh, this is going to be like a 9-to-5 stable career. Unlike retail management where your shifts were always changing.
Yeah.
That part was naive on my part. I obviously had no idea what it was actually like to make games in 2004. But I decided to go ahead and apply, and I took an interview with the GM there at EA Chicago. They had just opened up. They had been out in the suburbs, and they just moved to new office space in downtown Chicago. And it really was kind of a shocking experience for me. I was before I got into games. This plays into the nerd trope again. I didn't swear. I didn't drink. Um, it was it was definitely just kind of this eye-opening experience for me to then come in and be hit by the GM with all of these like kind of crazy questions. And when I asked what would the job entail, please tell
Uh-huh.
me a little bit more. Please
Yeah.
tell me what I would be doing. I'm new to games. I want to
Yeah.
understand. Basically, he leaned over the desk and got fairly close to my face, and to me felt like shouting, but said, "You will be doing some shit." Yeah,
It's like that's like a straight out of Grandma's Boy or something. Like that's like so
yeah, and I
so
tried
sitcom
to.
game job.
I'm just sitting there trying to play it cool. Like, could you tell me a little bit more about what that means? Could you give me some specifics? And he just kept reiterating that I would be doing some shit. And come to find out, that was the best description anyone's given me of what I would do in games.
Like
But
the most succinct and truthful statement. You will be doing some
exactly.
shit. Yeah.
But ultimately, I fell into it. I fell into it. I came back, and then I had much more traditional round of interviews on my second time into the studio there at EA with panels of people that I would be working with who were asking me actual questions about my competencies. And so I decided. They offered me the job, so
Yeah.
I decided I would take the job, and I came in, and the GM actually gave me the choice, either to work under him as basically an assistant or to work on the game team. And I thought, I'm brand new. I don't know anything about making games. I really want to learn and absorb everything I can. So I took the job under him. And I did get a lot
Yeah.
of exposure to a lot of different parts of what was going on in the studio that I wouldn't necessarily have if I had started out on a game team.
That's really interesting because actually I joined EA around the same time and I went on to a game team and was in the game team for a short period of time and then ended up getting promoted very rapidly into leadership and really wished that I had more experience with kind of knowing how to make hard calls and like what are the trade-offs for these kinds of things. And so, I mean, in a way, it's like, wow, that couldn't be better preparation for your job now. What were some of the things that you learned when you were in that position when you were like say in your first couple of years? Like what was it like? Like were you were you learning about how decisions were made? Like, was it business stuff? Like,
Sure. I would say it was all over the place. My first few months were how I would describe very Mr. Miyagi style. It was very fast and just throwing tons of things at me, things that may have had to do with games or something like, can you find me a jersey? I need it by this weekend, and it's for a team that is opposing Chicago, so nobody actually carries this jersey. So it was a lot of quick problem solving on my feet, having to figure out how to do a wide assortment of things I had never done before without a ton of guidance in what I should be doing. So, really kind of trial by fire, but
yeah,
still with support, still with, and I always was given, I knew that my contribution, even if it was something as stupid as, picking onions out of a salad, that it was appreciated. But it was such just this wide berth of, okay, now I need you to go work with the operations area and plan a party. And you have, in my eyes at that time, a huge
huge
budget that you're
budget.
going
Yeah.
to work with. And we're going to be inviting celebrities and politicians. And how do you line those people up? How do you make those relationships? And work with the vendors, work with the catering, get things shipped, like figure out how we do security. We hired models, we making it part of a recruiting event. So I worked with so many different aspects of the company and got to know a bunch of different figures. And then I also was working on, hey, can you take these screenshots? Can
Yeah.
you do some QA for us? Um, and all of that kind of parlayed pretty quickly into working on a game team about 3 months later. And my focus was on the art side of it. I was technically an art production manager, but I did contract reviews at that time for Girls of MySpace, um, which were a thing. I photographed textures essentially for the artists, or
Yeah.
things for that we were doing cross promotions, clothing that we needed to replicate in the game. I worked with the personalities. Whenever a personality would come to the studio or one of the rappers on Def Jam, I was coordinating that. I was coordinating
That's so
um,
exciting.
early
Like, I'm
streamers
already
coming.
jealous.
I was just doing a bit of everything. And I think the first real producing where I was left on my own, it was just an art director, a video editor, and I feel proud of this. I produced the training videos for the Def Jam Icon game. And that felt pretty cool.
Yes.
And that gave me, I was the only producer on that, so I had to make a lot of decisions, and just decide what we were doing, and make calls on,
Yeah.
also artistic calls as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I learned a lot. I
That
learned a
that
lot.
sounds like I mean, it's like so much, right? And it really brings to mind, just listening to you talk about it, how in like 2004, 2005, everything was just growing. People were like teams were growing, people were opening new offices, like the business was doing great. And it was just this really intense time of growth and like expansion. And there weren't that many people in the industry yet. So you could break in pretty easily and get a lot of experience very quickly, promoted very quickly, just like me, right? And then here you are, you got your name in the credits, you're making calls on stuff, and you're like overseeing content, and you can say like, I make video games for a living. That must have been sort of a trip.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. I definitely was pretty bright-eyed and bushy-tailed coming into it. And those first couple years, I mean, I worked definitely a lot of hours and very hard, but I really felt like part of the team, and I really felt like I was making something cool. I was learning a lot. Like I said, I always felt appreciated. Now I realize, right at that time, when I looked at the GM and saw that the GM was working just as many hours as I was, and just as devoted, and pushing just as hard, I felt like, wow, that's a great boss, because they aren't asking me to do something they're not willing to do.
Yeah.
Now, as I've gained some maturity,
Yeah.
15 years later as a leader, I
Right.
realize that I want to model things differently.
Yeah.
I still really appreciate that boss, but I know that I need to model that it's okay to have vulnerabilities. I need
Yeah.
to model that it's okay to stop, that it's okay to slow down.
Sleep.
Uh, that you don't need to just I mean, the this poor person just hit the Red Bulls all day long,
Yeah.
right? Keep going, and that we just don't have those same expectations anymore. I
Yeah.
feel like the industry luckily has been able to mature.
Absolutely. And also, it was sort of, I think, the direct result of other changes that happened. Like even for myself, being at EA in 2005, 2006, 2007, then getting up into the global financial crisis of 2008. It's like, wow, like things changed a lot very quickly. Where did you stay at EA? Like how did it go for you in that first 5 years of your career? How
Yeah,
did it go for you? Because it was a dynamic time for all of us.
so EA Chicago shut down. Uh, I was there a little less than 2 years. It feels longer than that with how much I learned and how much I did. But unfortunately, the entire office was shut down. And so I was laid off. And I'd never been through a layoff until then. And growing up, as I mentioned, knowing people in manufacturing and working in factories and things, a layoff was never a permanent thing in I didn't think when I was growing
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
because often every summer my dad got laid off and he'd get called back to work. So at first I don't think it even really hit me that this layoff was permanent, that it meant you just don't have a job. So
Yeah.
I I didn't know exactly what to do, but I looked around and some people I had known from EA actually started another game studio here in Chicago. And so I went over and joined their game studio, their startup, and I was one of the first 23 people at another independent game studio called Robomoto. And we worked on the Tony Hawk franchise. We took it over from Neversoft,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we worked on everyone's favorite, the peripheral versions of the game.
Oh, of course. So you were in
Yeah.
you were in the small studio that was like taking the franchise game and like getting it out on as many platforms as possible. Did you get to meet Tony Hawk?
Oh yeah.
He's so
Yeah.
cool.
And no, so we were making a game explicitly for the peripheral. It was not a port. It was a game from scratch. We
Oh,
even
that's
created our
awesome.
own engine and everything, and we created the hardware ourselves.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so actually, someone who I worked with then, we just hired here at Iron Galaxy, but he was really integral in creating the hardware and duct taping accelerometers to plywood. And that part was really cool because I hadn't been on the hardware side at EA at all. And so seeing that, I felt it was super cool. And yes, I think Tony is great. I love Tony. Hi, Tony. Um, Definitely got along with him. I thought Tony was a great advocate for the franchise. So I really enjoyed working with him.
So you were there and it was a huge success, and you made a ton of money and you became independently wealthy, and what happened?
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. So we made two games for the peripheral and the franchise, Ride and Shred, and then I was laid off again.
It's like the story of the games industry. Like, take a risk, take a risk, You never know. You just never know. You had a great time while you were doing it, but the second time the layoffs came around, did you think like maybe this is a pattern and this is going to be the rest of my life?
Yes, the second time I was not nearly as bright-eyed or naive. I had a feeling, and actually I took all of my belongings from the office home the weekend before it happened because
You have the
I
sixth
just
sense.
knew it was
Yeah.
going to happen. And I thought, well, the worst thing that happens, I'm wrong and I'll bring my stuff back. And so, yes, that Tuesday, unfortunately, uh, about 66% of us or more got laid off. The studio did not completely close at that
Mm.
time,
Yeah.
but the majority of us were laid off. And honestly, I really contemplated, should I be in games anymore at that point? I it didn't seem like the most stable of career choices. And I'm a fairly practical person. So I started, Dave always laughs about this, but I started actually doing some volunteer work, doing some responsible demolition. So basically,
That's
we were
awesome.
demolishing things, but we were reclaiming the brick to reuse and
Yeah.
being thoughtful about how we were doing this demolition work. And I started volunteering for that. And it was good, get some frustrations out, breaking some things, and help out my community, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I started thinking maybe I should be a baker. Maybe I should, I don't even know, figure something out. And then actually, Dave found me. Josh Sway, who was at Robomoto, reached out to other local devs and let them know about the layoffs. And that often
Yeah.
happens in our small community, which I appreciate. And so Dave Lang gave me a call and invited me to come into Iron Galaxy for some interviews. And at
Wow.
that, yeah, exactly. And I thought, what do I have to lose? Right?
Yeah.
An okay position to be in. And I showed up. I couldn't even find it, honestly. MapQuest, was it MapQuest at that time?
Yeah,
Sent me
probably.
to the wrong place.
Oh no.
But at that time, it was just a small office, 13 guys in former Cabrini Green,
Yeah.
just getting it done. And I had a little bit of a snobby attitude, I'll admit. When I first walked in, I was like, oh, these people are making ports. I've been making AAA games for the last 5 years. I'm so fancy. What am I doing here? So I did have a little bit of an attitude, but I am so happy I decided to take the job. It was hands down one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
What was
So
your interview like? What were you able to ask like hardball questions like when are you laying me off? Like,
well, I think I was definitely more assertive because, again, I didn't feel like I had anything to lose. I felt in some ways like these people I kind of knew my worth, right? I knew that I would add value at that point. I wasn't
yeah.
questioning that. I no
Yeah.
longer felt like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. And so, I'm on that end of it.
Yeah.
I'd been the sole producer on the Tony Hawk franchise. I'd worked with, I'd worked with marketing. I'd worked with cross promotions. Again, I worked with talent. I worked with every discipline,
Yeah.
art, programming, everything. And so I had a lot more confidence. I I don't remember what questions I asked. I remember what I wore, and I remember that Nate
What did you
Mefford was
wear?
on crutches. I I remember what I wore to both interviews in games. I didn't actually really interview for Robomoto, so I don't have an interview outfit for that. But I wore kind of a plaid smock.
Okay.
I wore a plaid smock to my interview. And
Chelsea's incredibly fashionable, which you can't see on the radio, but you can just check her out anytime she's at a conference. She's always got the best glasses, best lipstick, best hair. Super great.
Thank you.
So yeah, I know that you looked fierce, whatever.
I had a very short haircut because just very recent before that, I had an unfortunate dyeing experience, and my hair fell out in clumps, and I had to cut it very short.
Short. So when you were looking at this room of 13 dudes, from what I understand, Iron Galaxy came from Dave's urge to work with his friends for the rest of his life. He had also experienced multiple layoffs throughout his career and was just like, fuck this, I'm going to start a studio and see if I can keep it going. How long had they been going, and what were their needs at the time that you joined the studio?
So they'd been going about a year and a half when I joined, and it did start just Dave in his basement. He had no idea that it would be more than him in his basement originally, but then he slowly started to talk to some of the other folks that he'd worked with at Midway, who he thought were just really exceptional at their jobs and who he really enjoyed working with, and convincing them that there might actually be something to these consulting gigs, that they should come over and help him. And so he very slowly, gradually started getting some people together. And for the first 6 months, everyone worked out of their basements. Then an office came to be. And so when I started, everyone was a programmer except for one person,
Oh,
Chad
wow.
Newhouse, who's our art director. And he was virtual out in San Francisco. We used to call him VChad. And he's still in San Francisco. So I have to admit, the one thing I did find a bit intimidating was I had never solely produced programmers before.
Yeah.
It had always been more full game development or working with art, which was my background. And so I knew I knew I didn't know how to code. I don't know C++. So that was a little bit intimidating. But what they really needed was someone to help them make decisions, help them organize, help them just stay on track, hit milestones, help figure out how to do tasking, take some of those responsibilities off the programmers themselves. And
Yeah.
those were really some of the initial needs. Talk to the publisher, interact with the clients. They needed that kind of thing.
Yeah. So they wanted to be heads down making
Yes.
making software essentially, and didn't want to have to do all the miscellaneous tasks. As you were sort of picking up this miscellaneous stuff, did you start to think to yourself like, wow, like this is going to become like a situation where eventually I'm this co-CEO of a studio with, I don't even know how many employees you guys have now,
A little
150?
over 200.
200. See, you're
Yeah.
huge, and
It's
that's
crazy.
amazing, right? So like, what was the sort of momentum like, and like what was your experience like, kind of between then and now? Like, I would say, like,
Sure.
what was that journey like for you?
I had no idea it would get any bigger than 15 people. I was employee number 13. When I first started, basically, we basically there were no plans to get bigger. It was incredibly organic at first, and it was just looking for holes that we needed to fill to properly service the projects that we had, and to continue to be diverse in our portfolio of projects and partners that we were working with to maintain stability.
Yeah, because you don't want to get caught out. If for those of you not familiar with creative co-development projects, like Iron Galaxy or Phenomena does, there's often the chance that something that somebody really needs help with or really wants to get done for a launch ends up kind of getting cut or delayed, and then you get laid off. And so there is this constant risk, right? That if you have all your eggs in one basket, you won't be able to cover your head count.
Yeah, and so that was something that actually really appealed to me about Iron Galaxy, was that strategy of not having all the eggs in one basket, was being diverse, understanding that you needed multiple partners, that you kind of always needed to be hustling for new work. You couldn't get comfortable and sit on your laurels. And so, yeah, when I started, I had no idea. I thought we would remain very small. When I talked to Dave, he also felt the same way. Oftentimes he and I would sit and talk and like, oh, we'll never be over 20 people. Oh, we'll never be over 35.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll never be over 65. We'll
Yeah.
never be over 100. And then we stopped saying never after 100. But it was pretty organic. And I know I've mentioned this when I've talked to some other people too, but one of the things I found pretty quickly with Dave and I was our personalities were different. If you've ever heard Dave talk, you might know about this. We had pretty different
Yes.
personalities. And so Dave was the outward face of the company. And Dave went out and Dave did the business development. And God bless him, he was bad cop on any of the calls where we had to we had to give the partners some bad news. I got to be
Yeah.
good cop. And I really was back of house. I was managing the projects. I was taking a look around the office and kind of figuring out what else needed to be done. Do we need an office manager? Who should we be hiring? How do we deploy people on projects? How do we keep people happy around the office? What kind of benefits are we missing? So mostly I never really thought, I guess, about what my job was. I just looked around and saw where does the studio need help?
Yeah.
And
Like, what gaps can you fill?
exactly. And I've told this to Dave, for the longest time, I thought my job is to make Dave's job easier. So what can I take that makes Dave's job easier? And framing it that way, I feel like it was easy for me. to make decisions. Also, that idea of nothing, I didn't feel like I had something to lose, because actually, for as embracing as the team was, for being 12 people who already knew each other and had that connection from Midway and had worked with one another before, it was hard at first to get them to understand that it wasn't just Dave who was going to make decisions
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
And so one time when Dave was gone, we needed to make a decision about a milestone. And I even remember who it was. I remember talking to them and I said, well, we just have to make a decision. It's
Yeah.
worse if we don't make a decision. I will make it. If it goes south, if Dave doesn't like it, everyone, you all tell Dave, this is
It was
on
me.
Chelsea, it's me. And that if Dave wants to fire me, so be it. And that was really a pivotal moment, because I didn't get fired. And I think that then gave me a lot of confidence to continue to make decisions. And frankly, it gave me some of the respect of my peers to see that I would take charge
Yeah.
and that I was capable of making good decisions and moving it forward. So,
So at this
yeah.
point in time, you're starting to grow and get more business. How many other women were there at the studio? Did you have a support network? Was it just you? Were there other producers? Like, how did you start to build out that aspect of the company? Because I know that's been something that you've been especially vocal about over the last couple of years, is like how important it is to build those things into the company. How did you get to that perspective?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So when I was hired, I was one of the first two women hired. We hired a female programmer, a woman programmer, the same day I was hired, and Sujatha is still with us to this day.
Yay.
So I was never alone. And actually, at one point at Robomoto, I was the sole woman there. So I was never
Mm.
alone as far as my sex at Iron Galaxy. Uh, I think that though for a long time we didn't actively think about diversity. Right? We didn't actively think about how do we attract more people who are different than we are. We were totally happy to embrace people who look different than we were, who had different experiences. I never felt othered
Yeah.
by the 12 men around me, right? But it wasn't something that we actively made a cause. And I think being in games up until the point of Iron Galaxy, it wasn't even something I thought I could advocate for. We were always very careful at Iron Galaxy to look for equity, make sure we were being equitable, make
Yeah.
sure people are being treated fairly, making sure everyone's being compensated the same for the role,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
regardless of whatever. But we never thought, gosh, we should actually be actively trying to recruit a more diverse group of employees until a few years ago. And it wasn't something I really realized I could impact or ask for until a few years ago.
And
Yeah,
I was going to say,
go ahead.
what was the catalyst for that?
I started getting some people coming to me at the studio who said, one of the reasons that I came to Iron Galaxy was I saw you in a position of authority. And that made me feel like this could happen for me, or that it must be a good place to work or a safe place to work. And when I started hearing more of those messages from people, it really lit a fire under me and a sense of responsibility, that, okay, I need to come out of the back of the house. I need to let more people know I'm here. Because especially even bringing on Adam, we brought Adam on as co-CEO or CEO at that time about 5 years ago now. And if people know Adam and Dave, they're both big guys physically and just big personalities.
Big
And
personality. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm a small person. I think I've got a cool cool personality.
You
Woo!
do. I love
Um,
your personality, but
you know,
compared to the two of them, it would be easy to maybe lose you in the mix from time to time, is what I would say.
yeah, and I was also totally fine, just being in the background. I was totally happy. My ego did not need to kind of be a personality. So it wasn't me trying to, like I said, kind of fill an ego. It was me trying to fill this responsibility of showing other people that this is something they could do. Because like I said before, when I was a kid, I had no idea what
Yeah.
kind of jobs or careers were out there. At one point, I thought, I'm going to make cookies for McDonald's, right? This is going to be my career. I had no idea. So it became even more important to me now that I can have a bit of a platform to let other people know this is achievable.
I had the same experience and also had the conversation with Siobhan Reddy about this. And it was like around the time of Gamergate, especially, there was just a lot of a conversation on the back channel with senior women, I think, in the industry who had typically been behind, in the back of house, like Angie Smith and Siobhan and you and several others that were just like, it's time that I am no longer just the glue that holds the studio together, the producer that makes everything work. I'm actually seen as a leader, as someone who's on the front line and someone who's making, hard calls, and that will inspire people to come and work with us, but also give girls an opportunity, and like people of color, queer folks, trans folks, an opportunity to really see themselves reflected in the media surrounding the games industry, because it has, and since you left, EA and then joined Iron Galaxy, even, it had already started to become such a focus culturally, globally. We had gotten through the GFC and gotten so big that there was a lot of media now. There were movies about video games. There were people talking about getting jobs in video games. Programs were starting at colleges. And suddenly there was a sort of a gap there, and the standard curriculum, quote unquote, of video games. Like if you look up, video game designers on, Wikipedia, for example,
Sure.
it would be almost exclusively white men. So you had this moment where you were like, okay, I'm going to put myself out there. Were you excited about this, or were you trepidatious, or where were you? Like
I was trepidatious, honestly, because
Yeah.
I've also traditionally been a pretty private person. Like I said before, I was very shy. I kept a lot of my personal life very personal. I still do that, but I started to see what an impact more sharing could have, and being vulnerable and letting people know that, I didn't come from anything. I
Yeah.
came from a poor upbringing without a lot of opportunities, and that I was able to do this, that I didn't have support of family, that I am a non-binary identified person,
Yeah.
or I like to consider myself a fluid person. That's the
Yeah.
word I use. Um, and it became more important to get over my fear of saying these things about myself, because I want other people to be able to see a little sliver of themselves, hopefully reflected, and to know that it's okay, to know they're okay, and to know that they have opportunities, and they shouldn't let whatever these things are about themselves hold them back.
So we've been like sort of seeing this movement now where people are really trying to walk that walk. And I think that one of the greatest things about what you've been doing over the last couple of years is that you really are walking the walk. Can you say a little bit about what okay, you have this company that's known for starting from a group of dudes that were all friends and has these two big white dudes at the helm. Like that's not a small thing to get over, right? Like to sort of step up front and then and initiate this kind of a momentum would take a lot of planning, and I would imagine like a lot of collaboration with partners both inside and outside the company. Like, what were some of the strategies that you put in place for the rest of the world who probably still has some work to do in this area?
As far as getting myself out there and speaking more about myself, or as
Just
far as
just just
elevating?
just like elevating the cause internally and making it
Sure.
something that was like a mission inside the company that everyone shared.
So, one of the things that I have loved about Iron Galaxy is I have felt such support and autonomy. So, I think the reason I was kind of struck by that conversation was I was like, well, it was never a question. I just did it. I didn't, I just kind of moved forward, and I knew it was the right thing to do. And not that I just kind of plowed my way or never look for consensus, but I wasn't scared to say, I think this is important, and therefore I'm going to move forward with it. And I think it's important that people, sorry, Dave, but know more about the brand of Iron Galaxy than the brand of Dave Lang, right? Because they're a little bit different. And I think that it's important that we have a DEI committee. I think it's important that we show that leadership really supports this and backs this and is listening. And, Dave and Adam are always listening too. I think in some ways, being large white men, I think in some ways they felt constrained to even start a group like that on their own, that it wouldn't seem authentic if it was coming from them.
Yeah, I think
So,
that's actually a genuine
yeah,
fear for a lot of, the sort of more traditional games industry hires is like, well, I would really like to make a difference. One I hear all the time is, but I just don't know where to start, or I just don't know where to find the women or where to find the queers. And I'm
sure,
like,
sure.
they're out there. Trust me.
Yeah,
You just gotta,
they're
you
all
really
over.
just gotta turn your light on and attract them. Like there's a special light. Didn't you get the special light? And then they're like, what? I'm like, no, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I really think, and this is also a reason I've decided I don't want to just speak about Iron Galaxy either. I want to elevate and get some other voices out there. Dan Coleman, who's our head of product development, just did an interview talking about his experience as a queer game developer and being gay in games. And I want people to get a chance to see people like themselves again.
Yeah.
Shaker, who was our GM, wrote an article for Gama Sutra. And I want to elevate other voices at Iron Galaxy, because they can tell their story more authentically than I can. So we need to get them out there and speaking too, and sharing their experiences and letting people know. Instead of me just saying, yeah, people feel like we have a really inclusive environment here at Iron Galaxy, that other people are actually sharing about why they feel included or why they feel comfortable.
So as you've moved into the sort of pandemic, did it have any impacts on these initiatives? What was your experience with like kind of doing this as you were also dealing with like, obviously we've all just had so much pressure, and it's like, I think one of the things that also sort of dissuades people from taking that first couple of steps around like having a committee, and making commitments to, how they're going to improve their diversity and retention, in particular around hiring, like, is that just that we're also overwhelmed? Like, what was your experience of kind of doing this, just as that stuff was also sort of spinning up?
Sure. I think some things were easier and some things were harder. I think I think the pandemic has been hard on everyone, and even just getting everyone home and making sure we all knew how to work from home, making sure people felt supported, making sure everyone has the right equipment and their equipment is working. All of that was something new to learn. And since 2008, we had an office also in Orlando, Florida. We've got Chicago and Orlando, and we'd often do things to try to get people to know each other across the offices. We do we work on all the projects together. I was going to say we do internal co-dev, and maybe that sounds kind of weird, but we work on the projects together at Iron Galaxy. And I think I had given myself a little bit of a pat on the back and thought we were doing a really good job there. And one thing the pandemic did, thankfully, was make me see how much more we could do to bring people
Yeah.
from the two studios together, people who are remote down in Austin, and make them all feel like the same team. So that has been a really big effort. But at the same time, we knew we really wanted to focus on diversity, not just because I came up with it myself, but we had done a survey as well, and people in the studio reported that that was something they'd like to see us have more of a focus on. And for 2020, we had planned to do more outreach to colleges and really focus on HBCUs and really expand our reach
Yeah.
as far and so that did get sidelined in
Yeah.
2020. Luckily, we're doing that now, but that was one of our hopeful initiatives that did unfortunately get sidelined. We did bring on, though, dedicated recruiting staff, and thank you, Jack and Eli. Woo! They have been amazing, and I shared very clearly up front with them how important the idea was of looking for diverse candidates, of attracting them. I know I've said it indirectly already here today, but that's part of why I'm out here doing talks.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah. Yeah.
is in hopes of recruiting some of these people so they hear about us and they even know that we're a viable option, or maybe they've never heard of Iron Galaxy before. So recruiting has been a super big focus. We've actually hired and onboarded over 80 people in the last year remotely during COVID.
And this is like, sort of the fairy tale ending to having done something really outstanding in general, which is build a business that can expand capacity to support a growing industry, right? That also has values that are family friendly, like no crunch
Yeah.
culture and this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And so, like, I feel like one of the things that I love about Iron Galaxy's story is that it really was like, at the 8-year mark, as someone who's at 8 years now with a studio, I can look back and think like, okay, that's where they were around year 8, and that's kind of where we are now. But it provides a roadmap for a studio like mine of like, okay, you build the core base, you understand the business, and then you really go for it. And when you grow, you can grow sustainably, you can grow with the right values, your hiring is on point. You have, people that are having dialogues with each other about issues as they emerge, as opposed to sort of trying to patch things up
Yes.
later, which often happens with larger organizations that don't start from a values-led culture. So I think that's I think it's really inspirational where you guys have landed in the last few years, and especially through the pandemic. And I just, as a person that's always watching and like looking for leadership in this area, I wanted to give you some kudos, because I think that it takes courage to step out and be in front, but it really does require thinking through a lot of different variables, and especially during the pandemic, how to create a sense of belonging and safety and inclusion alongside of continued efforts to sort of modify and improve processes, which, looking back on your career now, it's not a surprise that you were able to do that, because you kind of got a jump start on it right away.
Yeah, I just always jump in and fill gaps. And I think what you said about values is really important because, we don't think of people really as culture fits. We think, do our values align, right? Are
Yeah.
are we appreciating the same values? And we also, even at 200 people, right? At 13 people, it's easy to think of people as people. But at 200 people, that's something that's so important to us, to treat everyone like an individual, to recognize that they're an individual, to recognize that they're a person. And a big part of our values is being a big feedback culture, of
Yeah.
making sure that people are getting feedback in the moment, that they're getting written feedback every other week, that they have people there to help them and help them set priorities. And so that feedback, I think, leads to some culture of respect too. People have to learn how to communicate and have to build relationships with one another, so they're able to give hard feedback in a constructive way that someone can hear.
Yeah.
And for me, the relationship is so important. When I know and care about someone, it is so much easier for me to give them hard feedback because I really want them to improve.
Yeah, it's a gift. It's genuinely a gift. It's not part of some like creepy 360 process where you know that if you give bad feedback, then that they'll end up in the lower quartile and get cut, which is a lot of times the way that people
Exactly.
experience feedback in these larger organizations. I was actually thinking about it because like one of the things that we implemented over the last, couple of years that was a direct result of a conversation with you was 15.5. Like I think you were the first person that I really had a conversation with about like what does this mean for your studio and why does it work, and what is the way, what are the ways in which you kind of leverage it and how to use information. And that conversation was so helpful to me because I think, as an executive, you worry about opening up the Pandora's box of like people being, complaining, anonymous feedback, all these other things. And I had been in situations in larger organizations where I had tried to initiate transparency, and it had really resulted in executive pushback because it was like, well, we know that people don't like the way we do X, Y, or Z, but we're definitely not changing it. So having a conversation about it is not helpful. And I think it was so great to be encouraged, like, yeah, not only can you do this, but you can do this with a tool. Here's how the tool works and stuff. And so that was definitely one way that we got more transparent and also just better at giving feedback in real time as we started growing, which happened again, yeah, like around 3 years ago. What are some of the other things that you've put into place to kind of create a transparent and collaborative culture?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do is an orientation with every new person. And Adam does an orientation as well, and his focus is more on the history of Iron Galaxy and more the business side of Iron Galaxy. And my orientation really focuses on our values and culture. I realized we've got our values on the website and they're great, right? People, continuous improvement, capabilities, partners, and that all feeds into our main goal of sustainability and
Yeah.
stability. But we weren't really sharing with everyone explicitly all of our kind of secondary and tertiary values anymore. And I was kind of expecting them to trickle down like Reaganomics. And we know Reaganomics was so successful. So when I started to think, okay, I need to really explicitly talk to people about this. And this, like you said, having conversations with other game devs, I credit Bonfire, honestly, with helping me
Woo,
see
woo.
this. Yeah, give them a little shout out. I had gone to visit them and luckily share some wisdom back and forth about what we're doing in each other's studios. And they helped me see that there were all these values and I needed to share them, like I said, more explicitly, more clearly. So now I sit down with every new hire and I talk about these things like contextual transparency and why that's important to us and why it's not just full transparency on everything at every moment, but that you want to think about what information is important, what information is helpful, who is your audience for information, how do you share information in a way that's impactful. And none of this means I'm trying to hide something, but it means just trying to understand your audience and be a good communicator and build a relationship there. We've also worked hard during the pandemic to come up with a lot of ways to bring people together virtually. I do a what I call fun lunch, and I invite about 5 or 6 people to eat pizza with me once a week, and we send pizza to their house. And it's casual and it's group of people, not just from the disciplines of art, design, programming, QA, but also people from our Galaxy services, people from IT or operations,
Yeah.
who I think often can get forgotten about in games sometimes. So it was great to be able to just bring people together to get to know each other and uh, since it's remote, I can have people from Chicago, Orlando, it doesn't matter where. So that's one thing. We've done happy hours like so many other companies. I started a parent and caregivers get together because I realized the
Yeah, it's
extra
been hard for
strain,
parents.
yeah,
Yeah.
during this. So get together and commiserate and share things. Um,
Yeah, we have a
what
parenting Slack, which is just like
awesome.
a complain-a-thon
Oh
essentially.
yeah.
And
Oh
then like
yeah.
occasionally like really cute baby pictures. And I'm always in there like, oh my God, I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, we have a Teams channel similar to the Slack as well as the Meetup. Last week Dave taught everyone how to make fried chicken sandwiches. We're putting together an Iron Galaxy cookbook. We try to do a lot of different events, and we've sent out care packages, especially early in the pandemic. At first, I was like, oh my gosh, we're doing this. But in Chicago, Adam Boyes drove to every employee's house to drop off a care package at the beginning of the pandemic. And Tom Carbone did the same down in Florida. And people appreciated that. Here is a bag of groceries. At that time, I was playing the worst video game of all time, which was called How Can I Keep Things in My Cart for Delivery?
Yeah.
And then feel like I lose every time because now I just cheated some poor grandma out of a gallon of milk or something.
Yeah.
Um, so we just kept trying to think of what are things that hopefully make our employees' lives better. We gave a mental health day, early on in the pandemic to hopefully help people adjust. I talked to my management team, right, um, about having more compassionate conversations with people and what kind of expectations can we have with people being home and how to foster a culture of flexibility. So
Yeah.
a lot of talking.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot of Zooming and supporting one another through Zoom. there's a lot of hanging out in optional channels. Like I feel like we spend
Yep.
a lot more time on our Discord now, like after hours hanging out with each other, playing video games, doing like draw alongs and stuff than we ever did before. It was like you see each other every day and you're like, okay, well, I don't really miss that person at night when I go home. I just hang out with my dog or my partner or whatever. And now it's like, wow, we really miss each other. I would actually say that like the physical presence of other people, that even just talking about creative work, it's just something that I miss so much. And recently, because I got vaccinated, I can have people down to my, to my little cottage in Santa Cruz, and we can talk and stuff and do a little bit of game brainstorming. And it feels so good to get back into a groove where you're like, yeah, check this out. And then you put on the headset and you like play it and talk
Yeah.
about it in person. I really have missed that. Do you have thoughts about like, getting back there? Do you miss it? Like what are your thoughts about like what the next, like say 6 months is going to be like?
I do miss it. I do think that there are missed opportunities for those casual conversations that are really important. Even right before the pandemic, I was so excited because some of those casual conversations also lead to just more inclusive content. I saw developers talking to each other and asking questions, getting feedback on how to create hair for Black characters
Yeah.
and, to make that more authentic. And I think that there is a barrier to just calling someone up like you would just drop by their desk. It feels like a meeting. So I do think you lose
Yeah.
some of that spontaneity in having some of those rich conversations. Everything pretty much is scheduled at this point. And like I said, yeah, you just don't have those casual conversations that are important. So for as much as we've tried to foster let's get to know each other casually, let's get to know your teammates, and as much as people have reported or back to me that they do feel included and they do feel like part of their disciplines, part of their teams, um, we're pretty eager to get back to the office. Now, we are all voluntary coming into the office until January 2022. So basically, since February of this year,
Yeah.
we have voluntary signups, and every month we ask people if they would like to go back to the office. Some people were reporting that their mental health was just suffering at home, and we
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
wanted to be sensitive to that and give people an opportunity to come back. We also wanted to be as cautious as possible. So we just have a very small handful of people in the office now, in both offices. And every month it grows just a little bit
Yeah.
because people are excited to come back. They do want to see their coworkers. And now, as people are getting vaccinated, it's easier to get vaccinated. That's also giving people more confidence to say, "Hey, I feel all right being in the office with other people again."
So
So it's
I think we can't
gradual.
we can't get through this segment without mentioning your balloons. Can you please
Oh,
describe and mention your balloons to
oh, of
to our
course.
listeners? Because I follow you on Instagram and I love your balloons, but I don't think I can do them justice.
Oh, well, thank you. So, early on in the pandemic, I decided to order a couple balloon bouquets, and I'd never actually ordered anything with a poop emoji on it, but I got a poop emoji and a rainbow and all these things, these balloons, and I started just putting them up in my background on Teams or Zoom. And it grew where basically my entire room was full of balloons.
It was so awesome.
And every time I would come on the screen, thanks, I kept doing it because people would have the reaction you just had. I would get a smile. I would get a, oh my gosh, I love your balloons. Are they real? I'd poke them so people would see them jiggle, and I would get Iron Galaxy color balloons. I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
get, holiday color balloons. I got a bunch of blue balloons right after the election last year. So and actually some social justice. I had Black Lives Matter balloons. I had mental health awareness balloons. There's a great women-owned balloon business here in Chicago. It also felt great to support them during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it became my thing because I felt like it brought some joy. Everyone has to stare at themselves and others in these little screens, and why not bring some joy? It's
Yeah.
it's one of the reasons I wear, Mickey ears out in public outside of Orlando, Florida.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just bring people joy, I think.
Yeah. I definitely have recently found myself, really upping my hat game and trying a lot harder to break into the back catalog of costume jewelry and things like this, because it's like, it just feels nice to put something new on the screen. You get a little
Yeah.
bit tired of seeing the same all the time.
And you always look great too.
Oh, well,
You
thank
always
you.
have
I
such
mean,
fun outfits.
the one thing I do really miss is getting to walk around and like see what new stuff people are wearing. And I've been thinking a lot about like, how can I reconstruct different things from my closet and like move things around into different outfits? I think over the summer I'm going to do a pretty big call, and then I'll have the sort of the excuse to go shopping for some new pieces. But yeah, I definitely feel like my hoodie collection is underappreciated right now, which has been a challenge during the pandemic. When you look back, at all the stuff that you've accomplished, and like think about you as this 12-year-old kid, sort of
Sure.
not sure if you were going to end up, making cookies at McDonald's or or working a service industry job, and you look at your life now, like what would you say you would tell yourself, back then about what you had to look forward to?
It's okay. Things
Yeah.
will be okay. I mean, honestly, it's kind of tough. I definitely didn't have an easy childhood. What I focused on was getting a good education and just thinking this good education is going to lead to something different, whatever it is.
Yeah,
So I would
same.
just let myself know that it's going to be okay. You're going to find supportive people. You're going to find a fulfilling career. You're going to not be living off saltine crackers
Yeah.
exclusively.
Yeah.
And when I thought I'd work for McDonald's, I thought, oh, maybe I'll have to live under the toll road bridge
Yeah.
because and then they tore the toll road bridge down. So even that dream was shattered. But I had no expectations. I had no expectations at that point in my life. So I would just let myself know that my life has become more than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's A, it's so inspiring, and B, it's so true, especially for younger people out there that are listening. Like, I know it seems really bizarre that we're existing in this time, and that, you're probably thinking like, oh, I'm going to graduate from college and then what? Or I'm leaving high school and like, should I even go to college? I've heard all these conversations from both, students of mine and friends and family who have younger kids. And like, I just think it's really important for them to take some inspiration from your journey and really see that like there are always opportunities to support other people. There are always opportunities to live your truth. And if you do that, good things happen, right? Your actions become the change that you want to see in the world. And I just really want to say, Chelsea, that I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And
That
I
feels
really am
really
glad that
nice.
you spent this time with us today. It's been great talking to you. And I really hope that you get some great recruits from this chat. And of course, obviously, I cannot wait to see you in person whenever that happens in the near future, hopefully.
Awesome. Me neither. I can't wait. We need to get another tiki drink.
Yeah, tiki drinks for sure. Tiki drinks and blue lipstick. I'm so
Yes.
there. Thanks so much, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Game Maker's Notebook. For more information on the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, our podcasts, and our other initiatives, please visit www.interactive.org.